Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 12 of season 12 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Well, the day this episode drops, my youngest daughter is graduating from high school, so I'll be out doing graddy type things. That means that both my girls are now done this stage of their lives, and I have to say they've both turned out to be pretty damn good people. I'm fortunate that I do have a really good relationship with my kids, and I hope that's always the case. My youngest is now taking a year off, and she's going to spend some time with family in England when we head over to visit in a couple of months, before taking a gap year and then heading to university to study for education. And she wants to be a high school math teacher. I think she'll be brilliant at it. You blink and they're toddling off to their first day at elementary school, and you blink again and they're graduating high school. In the words of Kurt Vonnegut, so it goes. Okay, over on social media, we were talking about last week's song, I Don't Want to Fight, and this is the lowest rated song on our polls since I started putting those up. 13% of you rated this one a perfect 10 out of 10. 21% landed in the 7 to 9 out of 10 range, with the 66% majority being in the 1 to 6 range, and that's where I was as well. Obviously, last week I rated that one as 6. Posting on Facebook, JP Kaufman didn't pull his punches, saying, I'd have to do a proper run-through to finalise this take, but I think it could be the worst song in T-Path history. Mike trying to sound a bit like Nirvana there in the 90s. It was very hard to take for me then, and I just played 10 seconds of it to see, and yup, still cringe-worthy now. I'll listen to your pod now to see what you think. Now, I'd probably argue that Mike wasn't trying to slide into the grunge sphere. I think Mike's always had those types of riffs and those types of songs in his locker. They've probably just never been right for an album before. And as I said last week, I wonder if a fighting fit Tom would have entertained this one, ending up on the record had he been on top form. So hard to say, of course, but they did play it regularly on the resulting tour. Is it the worst song in T-Path's catalogue? I don't know, man. There's a couple of songs that I think that would definitely said I would probably put ahead of this one. So Jack McNay answered, saying, my own stance has always been that I Don't Belong, an Echo outtake released on the American Treasure set, would have been better in place of Fight. Then it's a perfect album. And obviously, I've talked about this. Once the main catalogue is done, we'll be going back to talk about all the B-sides and the sort of since release material from those albums that we have. And I Don't Belong is a great song, but if I were editing, I'd likely, if you had my arm up my back, I'd probably just shorten the album by one song. But I guess we'll talk about that when John Paulson joins me to wrap the album in just a few short weeks. Daniel Cristofori, and I apologize if I'm getting that wrong, Daniel, who I think is maybe a first-time commenter. So, hi, Daniel. But he says, this used to be my least favorite T-Path song. I always skipped it. It was filler. I Don't Belong, in brackets one of my favorites, should have been there instead. However, as I've gotten older and my palate has broadened and I know the backstory, I actually enjoy this song now. And I don't know if I actually said this on this episode, but it definitely took a while to grow on me too. It wasn't one of those that I sort of fell in love with immediately. My trusty executive producer, Paul Roberts, says, great pod, Kev. Thanks, Paul. A lot of background info I didn't know. 6 out of 10. Easily the worst song on Echo. Still listenable, but has filler stamped all over it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun learning all these little tidbits and inside scoops on the songs. And to Paul Zollo, we all owe a debt of gratitude. And I'd say that, yeah, I mean, we use the word worst. I mean, I'd say you could say the word weakest or least good or whatever, because I think that all the songs on Echo are still good. It's just that some are quite a lot better than others, and I think this is one of the ones that it's just down on that lower end. Michael J. Holloway comments, I sing it, I don't want to fight because I'm a level-headed lover, which I think is great. I think we all have those lyrics we sing wrong because we sang them that way for so many years and then found out what the actual lyrics are. And I'm not sure that's what's happening here, Michael, but you know what? I salute you anyway. I love it. Richard Gibson, I really do have to get on the show. I've got to get on my guests. I've not been keeping on top of that, and I'll try to do better. But he commented, kind of going with the seaside logic that it's not in the top 50% of T-Path songs, or maybe at just above the halfway point. I can't give everything 70% plus. And if you get the reference to seaside logic, very well done. It's a callback to another podcast that I host about Queen, my Seaside Pod Review Queen podcast. On that show, we straight upvote or downvote each song. And there's always been a lot of discussion about how best to go about that. One theory being that if a song isn't in the top half of the catalogue, it gets downvoted. It's not the way I do it, but it's definitely the way some people do. Over on Instagram, Cheeto Rocky Dave Sticks, how about that for handle, commented, I always liked that Mike sang a song in their catalogue. Also cool, they did it on the road that year too. I'm thinking about that. I wonder if this and Mike's subsequent work on his own with the Knobs was any of the impetus behind Tom reforming Mudcrutch and, giving the microphone over to the other members of the band to let them have their sort of minute in the spotlight as well. I wonder if that played into the decision at all. But we finish up, as usual, over on Blue Sky, where my pal Steve Ursel wrote, it was fascinating to hear your insight into Mike and Tom's relationship and how Tom responded to his later songwriting efforts. I'll have to read Mike's book at some point. I think Mike has smashed it here. Very simple, but has a spiky, rocky attitude that I really like. Cool song. So, there we go. We get a very positive note to end on. And I recommended Mike's book Heartbreaker to Steve and would to anyone, whether they know Mike's work or not, or whether or not they're Petty fans. I think Mike's story is pretty universal and it's incredibly interesting. So I think if you're a music fan of any stripe, probably you'd enjoy it. And I wonder if any of you have sort of given this book to people who aren't Petty fans. I'd love to hear whether they enjoyed it or not. Anyway, that's the social media wrapped up. So that must mean it's time to start talking about a song. This week, we're listening to the shortest song on Echo. This one's for me. And before we start, there's a link in the episode notes if you want to go and listen to the song before we kick off. If you're new to the show, and I can't imagine you would be after this many episodes, but I don't play clips from the songs in the episode itself, so go to the episode notes and you can go check out the song there. And we are going to rip straight into it this week, as there's nothing I could find anywhere online in terms of interviews or comments about this song. Tom doesn't give us any info in Paul Zollo's conversations with Tom Petty, and as I say, couldn't find anything else online. The song was also never played live, so I suspect it's one of those that was just an album track that was recorded, the album went out, and no one thought anything of it from that point forward. The song begins on a hair trigger. We have a jangling open guitar in the left channel and the main strumming pattern being panned slightly right. The strumming pattern is very reminiscent of Walls, with a similar tempo and tone, and even that single snare crack to bring us into the first verse after two very short bars. It's a great mix again, with the drums and bass providing a really solid backbone to those two guitar parts that we get at the top. And so we're back into Beatlesy, Birdsy territory with this one, with Mike adding in those little licks in the left channel and following very sort of major key pentatonic patterns. There's a really nice tambourine added into the snare accents, and it's the rhythm section I find myself listening to in this one more so than the guitar parts of the melody, at this early stage anyway. It's that steady songs and music from She's the One type feel to the song, and Tom's talking about doing something for himself, with the message seeming to be that with all the noise and distraction, it's time to focus inwards and look at his own happiness, maybe for the first time in a long time. The verse ends on, again, a very Birds-esque minor key turnaround with a couple extra beats in there, and we head straight into the second verse where a harmony vocal part is added. And this is one of those times I'm not 100% sure who's singing that harmony. It sounds to me like it's Tom doubling himself, but how he was always so good at getting into lockstep with Tom's vocal timing that it could be Howie, but I think it is Tom though, especially because as the verse leads into the chorus, we get a much bigger vocal harmony where Howie definitely comes in to take that high harmony line. And in the second half of this section, a third voice joins the fray, which you'd probably guess is Scott Thurston, I would imagine. One thing that we don't get to say too often on this journey through the catalogue is we're now almost 2 songs along, or 1.5 songs into No Benmont Tench. And I'll have to maybe check, but I don't remember back-to-back songs on any album where there's no keyboard part, or certainly no keyboard part that's very clear in the mix. And there could be a very, very low organ part just filling out that chorus, but I think maybe I'm hearing that because I'm looking hard for something. The brain plays tricks on you like that sometimes. And because we do get keyboard later, but I'll stick with my first instinct that we don't get any Benmont up to this point. Coming out of this chorus and into the third verse, we have the addition of an acoustic guitar. So maybe the 2 electric guitar parts of Mike and Scott, and Tom is coming in on the acoustic. But it's not typical, so maybe Scott is playing that acoustic part too. And he is credited with both electric and acoustic guitars on the album. So let's say it's Scott Thurston coming in as the third guitar in this verse. And it gives this new section a little more breadth to the sound and keeps things trucking along, quite nicely. And there we go, right away in the second chorus, we get some keyboard. I think it's maybe organ, but I also think there's a slight possibility that it's maybe a mellotron. It could just be an organ being rammed through a different effect. But it's in that right channel, in that mid-range frequency, and it's just adding in a little subtle colour. And hey, you can't have Benmont Tench sitting around and not use him, right? So from this chorus, we head into a short guitar solo where Mike's really just playing arpeggiated chords with some slight embellishments here and there. It's very much in the vein of a lot of his lead work on this album, but at this point I do find myself thinking, I think we've more or less heard this before. And look, I'm not going to sit here and criticize Mike Campbell for what he's played. It's definitely a very natural part of this song, and I do find it has a slight Lindsey Buckingham-esque Fleetwood Mac type of lead quality. I think it's maybe in the percussive timing of it, the way he's playing it. But it just leaves me thinking that I think I'd like it a little bit more here. You know, maybe even having Benmont take 8 bars on the organ or something would lift this instrumental and this solo section into a slightly higher realm for me. The solo does end on that additional 2 beats, so we get a bar of 6, or if you like, 4-2, and then another 4. So it's the same pattern as the verse. All right, folks, it's time for your petty trivia. Your question from last week was this: which album features the longest single-word song title? And again, we're going here with Canonical, one of the 16 albums. Is it A, You're Gonna Get It, B, Hard Promises, C, Wildflowers, or D, Mojo? Well, the longest single-word song title on Mojo is Candy, clocking in at only 5 letters. And I'm really looking forward to hitting that record, and Candy's one of my favourites on it. And you know what? I've still never had Turnip Greens. There you go. You're Gonna Get It has 2 songs that come in at 8 letters long, in Restless and Magnolia, and the title track to Wildflowers comes in at 11. So your answer is B, Hard Promises, with the 13-letter long Night Watchman. Your question for this week is this: which album was sitting at number 1 on the Billboard chart on the day that Echo was released? Is it A, The Battle of Los Angeles by Rage Against the Machine, B, Human Clay by Creed, C, Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears, or D, Millennium by the Backstreet Boys? Okay, back to the song. Coming out of the solo, we get a nice dropout with the drums and bass leaving the mix, taking a back seat, sitting down, having a rest, going for a coffee, whatever. And that acoustic guitar and the spacey keyboard part that Benmont's playing taking center stage underneath Tom's vocal. The bass comes back in after 4 bars of this last verse, with the drums joining on the turnaround at the end. In the final chorus, that organ part is brought higher in the mix, and once it is, you can really hear that lovely mellifluous tone that Benmont's dialed into. We then have a 4-bar ending, as it sounds like we're heading into what you think possibly it's going to be another it's like a second solo, but after 3 bars, we get a big minor key ending, and the chords decay to fade. Vocally, Tom's in Wildflowers / She's the One mode. Again, this is what I was talking about earlier. A very clean delivery with very little performative affectation in his voice. And as with all Rick Rubin-produced Petty songs, it's a really clean mix. And along with the vocal being very present, the drums and bass are also very clear and clean in the mix, so you feel them punch home a little bit more. And I always think back to an album like Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, and how much better that album could have been, in my mind at least, with a strong production hand at the tiller. If Let Me Up, I've Had Enough sounded like Echo, I just think it's a better record straight away. Lyrically, this one's a simple rumination on chances allowed to slip between your fingers. You don't always know what you've got till it's walking away. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? I do have a criticism of this song, if you'll allow me to pitch it to you. I think it's a perfectly neat, tidy, compact, fun little bouncy piece of music with a perfectly nicely constructed, easy to remember lyric. The problem is, this one has always felt to me like Tom could crank out something like this on the way to the grocery store in about 5 minutes on any given day of the week. It's pretty much the only song on this album that I think is really safe and could really be considered filler. Last week's track is, it's jarring and it's unusual for a Heartbreaker song. It's got Mike on it, so it has a curiosity factor to it. With this one, sounds kind of like Tom Petty template number 1. It's one of those types of songs. And given how much I love pretty much everything about this album, this is a minor quibble, but I do think it's Tom really sticking to his wheelhouse and writing an album track that would never go anywhere other than the studio. And we don't like to use the S word, but it's kind of a stock Tom Petty track to me. Which is, again, admittedly better than almost any other band's stock songs, but when you look at the work that went into the standout tracks on this album alone, never mind the rest of the catalogue, the weight and depth of most of these tracks on Echo, this one just stands out as being a little bit less dazzling, maybe. And I look forward to being eviscerated in the comments for this sacrilege, but hey, it's all just opinions, folks. All just opinions. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. Yeah, look, I pretty much said it all before this last sting, didn't I? I'd never dream of skipping this song. It's a nice part of Echo, and as a whole, on the album, I do think it works, and it's in the right spot, certainly coming out of the angular jaggedness of I don't want to fight back into more familiar waters. But that's my issue with the track. They're very, very familiar waters. We've sort of heard Mike do this solo before. It feels, it's almost like the Simpsons or the SNL skit where they're writing a Tom Petty song. It kind of feels, it's almost like too self-referential maybe for me. So I'm going to do something I don't remember doing since the aforementioned Let Me Up I've Had Enough and go back to back with my ratings. So for me, this one's a 6 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. You can also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my bestie, Randy Woods. We just went live on YouTube this past weekend to do an album ranking show for the album The Miracle. Not one of Queen's best, if we're all being perfectly honest about it, but better than I remembered when I listened to it as a whole. You can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my great pal Corey Morissette. We had to skip this week. We didn't release an episode for the first time in our run, so we're well over 100 episodes in, and this is the first week we've missed. And that was all down to me being the schedule. My schedule was all over the map, and then I got kind of sick, and I'm still actually not feeling that great today. But I was feeling just about good enough to get this one recorded. But actually, anyway, don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Do the follow, like, subscribe thing, go do all that kind of stuff, and leave reviews and ratings if you haven't done those things. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will keep reading out your comments. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms or even go to your local independent record seller to grab some physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, please go to store.tompetty.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And also make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about the beautiful No More. Bye-bye.